I was dancing.
All right, Joey, take her out.
Middle name is graceful for a reason.
Well, she got help.
Who kicked that?
Joey do that. Joey, don't mess with my girls.
Yeah. Get her flip flops out.
Hey, Abby, when'd you come in here tonight?
Is that 1,001.25 years?
That's what the girls are getting. Okay, for those of you who know Eric, just thought I'd let you know that Eric and Deanna have had their baby. And everybody's fine, so if you see Mackie crying, it's not because she's sad necessarily, it's because she's just reminded about how old she is.
Hey, I heard that.
You see, that's just proof, because it's like 10 seconds for her to realize what
I was talking.
That's basically the message you're talking.
Remember after high school boys they tried to mess with us?
Do not.
You mean when they tried to mess with Eric?
He doesn't mean
Because if I remember correctly, y'all had nothing to do with Eric shooting up the high school boys. Actually, Nolan was the only one that really had much to do with it. Yeah, because Nolan will be anybody's bait. And that's why I love Nolan. His Nolan has no problem. Okay, so last week, Jacob, what? No, because he has no problem with look your mirror pillar for a moment.
David should pray for Jacob right now.
That he won't have to grant. Yeah, he said wipe around the marathon every year. I'm not sure if he's running a marathon or not.
Running a marathon.
in this weather. I know running period.
Okay, so last week Jacob started talking about, well, what, here, let's do this way. What did Jacob start talking about last week?
Jesus. I bet there was one English guy.
At least one? At least one. At least one. He started talking about prophecy. Yes, prophecy! He started talking about prophecy, kind of introduced right up here. By the way, you didn't know the answer because you're always talking and not paying attention.
Maybe she's put them out there.
She was thinking that words were coming from her mouth that's talking right now. Right?
I'm chewing food.
That's extra rude because you're talking with food in your mouth. I know your mama taught you better than that.
You don't know my mom.
Miss Maggie, what's going on with your girls, Miss Maggie?
Do what?
Except that I
What's going on
do.
with your girls? Are they being rude and talking with their mouth full?
Do not make me take my boot off.
No, please, not the boot.
That would take too long.
No, it's only a quarter boot. Somebody back here is,
I'm filling in for dinner.
Yeah, I'm up here.
Yeah,
he
he's
has to do
filling
my
in
stuff
well.
back there.
he's doing a good job.
Okay, so, yes, to answer Jordan's question from earlier, I know there are 52 weeks in a year. So that's not math though, so it's okay. It's not meant to be a year.
1,001.25.
I know, right? That was a nifty background that helmet computer. I tried to find whiteboards because, we don't use chalkboards anymore because whiteboards are kind of hypoallergenic.
What?
And cheaper.
What do you mean? What's that?
People don't sneeze as much.
My English teacher used to write them.
Okay, so we'll start today. Turn, if you don't have a Bible. Hey, look, there's some right there. Oh, get one too.
See, I brought mine.
After I tossed it to you.
Yeah, you can talk about how they forgot the Bible.
Turn in your Bible to Daniel 9. Daniel chapter 9. Okay, so usually when I'm up here, I was telling my wife, I don't usually come up here and do the teacher thing. Mine's more kind of preachy. I'll be honest, it is. And so it was kind of odd putting together a lesson for teaching. you guys, but it's okay because I've done the teaching thing once or twice. It wasn't that difficult to put it together. So, okay, everybody, Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9. The guy with the line. We're going to start in verse 20.
What verse?
Starting in verse 20.
I heard.
20. Okay, so what Jacob started prophecy, started introducing prophecy, and what we're going to talk about this week is, well, what has happened and what is going to happen, and look at how the prophecy applies to what has happened and what's going on right now and what's going to happen. Does that make sense? A little bit? But no, that I stole that off the website that gives us our materials. Actually, no, I didn't steal. I copied because when I right click, I can copy and so then it makes. And high five to Scott for showing me fun stuff to do to make it look nicer. It should be a GPS, but as you can see up here, it says no GPS
Is that the
needed
black line?
because God is our. It's a God.
No, okay. So there's no GPS needed, so why did you put a GPS? I thought it was a phone.
It's more like a map. We don't need a GPS. Did y'all not hear me when I said I copied this from somebody else? I didn't make this.
What were they
guys.
thinking?
Okay, so volunteer to moving on from the nonsense. Volunteer to read Daniel chapter 9, verse 20 through 27. Go ahead. Can you read it? Andrew's made me think you could. Go ahead.
It's the end of the chapter? Okay. Now while I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God on behalf of the holy mountain of my God, while I was still speaking in prayer, then the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision previously, came to me in my extreme weariness about the time of the evening hour. He gave me instruction and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I have now come forth to give you insight and understanding. At the beginning of your supplications, the command was issued, and I have to come tell you, for you are highly esteemed. So give heed to the message and gain understanding of the vision. 70 weeks have been decreed for your people and your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy Christ. So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again, plaza and moat, even in times of distress. Then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing, and the people of the Prince who is to come will destroy the city of century. And its ends will come with a flood, even to the end. There will be war, desolation, so determined. And he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and gain offering. And on the wing of the ambitions will come one who makes desolate, even until complete destruction. One that is decreed is poured out on the one who makes desolate.
Well, that's some exciting stuff right there. Very easy to understand. Not at all. Okay, so things you need to know just right off the top of that. So it says at the very beginning, 70 weeks. That's not 70 regular weeks like we have weeks. Okay? 1 week is 7 years. Okay, 7 week means 7 days. A week on this is 7 years. Does that make sense?
What?
What?
That's just it. You're from every Bible scholar that has ever lived.
It said the 70 weeks actually equals.
But that's what I'm telling you, that's what it's actually talking about, guys. It's not. Don't get confused. Don't get caught up on the word weeks. It's more like a word that means like groups of 7. And the word that we use for that is weeks because we have 7 days in a week. But it's periods of 7 meaning, but it's talking about 7 years, not 7 days.
Kind of like 4 scores.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that like
like that picture.
I don't know if it's just always been that way, like how do you,
Is it from the Hebrew?
wait, so one week.
So it says 1 year?
Yeah, in the Hebrew. Yeah, it's the original, it's the translation, the word that we have for periods of 7 is weeks, right?
Right.
Right? So that's the word that we use. Don't get hung up on the vocabulary. Just stay with me. The years that it's talking about, 1 year is 360 days, not 365 and a quarter days, which is what we have, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you sure?
Positive.
That's why we have an extra day
Actually-
every 4 years.
Actually,
Yeah. Okay, so 70 times 7, what's 70 times 7? Good job. So it's 490 years total, but there's going to be a gap in the middle. There's going to be, so we'll have 69 weeks, and then a gap, and then 1 week. So 483 years, because I didn't want to do the math right real quick. 483 years, which is 69 times 7. Okay, then a gap, and then 7 more years. You with me?
So what?
Okay, so the first part of it, Daniel's first part, is the 69 weeks, the first 69 weeks that he's talking about, the 483 years. It says, I did, that's okay. Right. 70 weeks have been decreed for your people in your holy city. We finish and we go, and we go, and we go, and we go. So it starts when there's a decree to rebuild the holy city. What's the holy city? Jerusalem. So, stop saying that.
Yes.
So, even right here, which is about 600 years, give or take, like 570, 580. I'm going to make you go home if you continue to distract me.
Oh, did I hurt?
Principal's office, I'll send you there. So, there's Babylon, that's the Babylonian Emperor Artaxerxes gave a command to rebuild. This is all background stuff. So rebuild Jerusalem, well actually the walls and everything to do with Jerusalem after the temple was rebuilt in 444. That's in Nehemiah 2. We're not going to read every single verse. There's a long verse. Nehemiah 2, and then it ends almost to the day of when Christ enters Jerusalem before his crucifixion. So almost 600 years before the crucifixion, the Bible tells us that it's going to happen. Almost to the day, which I thought was kind of interesting. Okay, so there's the 69 weeks on the left. Y'all see where I'm talking about? Okay. And then we've got the crucifixion. Right, that's where the cross is. I know you don't have to do it. Okay, so that's where we are. Okay, and then the gap is after Christ has died, has risen from the dead, and has ascended back into heaven, we have the church age, the gap, the unspecified period of time between the 69 years and the 1 year. I think Jacob left on purpose this week, so I would have to explain this confusing stuff. That just dawned on me. I bet he planned it this way. I'm going to complete physical background. Okay, so the goal, what was it say? God's goal is to use us to reach the world to spread the gospel, which, what is Matthew 20, 19, and 20? Come on, you know it. You know. This is the Great Commission. Very good. And then 1 Corinthians 15, 34 is the gospel. What is the gospel?
The Bible. Well, the Gospels are not the John, but the Gospel is the Bible.
What is the actual gospel, those? Right. Jesus Christ, knowing that we are horrible, terrible people, came in the form of man, lived a perfect life, died on the cross, was risen 3 days later. So we might make it to heaven. And that's what the gospel is. And that's God's goal, and that should be our goal, is to reach the world with the gospel and make disciples. Does that make sense? Okay, now turn to 1 Thessalonians 4, 16 and 17. Bless you. You're welcome. 1 Thessalonians. Chapter 4. It's right there. It's the bottom bullet. Chalk mark.
Hey, that's what you
Just testing you.
What, Caleb?
That almost target for anything.
Okay, in the end of this time that we're in right now, this church age, this gap in the prophecy between week 69 week 70, the end of that will be the rapture. Excuse me. When all of the saints, all the followers of Christ who are alive and are dead are gathered up and gone. Right? Just like that, I bet. Okay? So, right.
Commercial where the kid has the computer and wants to transfer this stuff. It's gonna be that song.
What?
I know the commercial coming up, but I don't remember the song. So anyway, someone read, who wants to read 16 and 17 for us? Go ahead, Caleb.
The Lord himself will come down from heaven with a loud command, the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet, of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first. Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
After that, we who are still alive and are loved will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so we will be with the Lord forever.
And never amen. Okay, so here's our map that y'all love so much, our timeline. So you can see the rapture, where it comes down and goes right back up again. Very exciting. And then after the rapture,
7 years.
begins the 70th week, which is the week of tribulation, or 7 years of tribulation. Okay? Begins with the rapture. Someone very powerful will rise up. We call him the, good job of reading, guys. The Antichrist. He'll be a very powerful political person who will oppose the things of Christ and be possessed and led by Satan himself, controlled by Satan himself.
Won't people
And-
think he is, like, won't people think it's a prophet? Like, it's about like people.
Well, false prophets also. Yeah, lots of different things going on.
There's lots of false.
And this is, we'll call this the very thin. There's a lot more to this stuff than what we're going to be able to cover in 1.5 hour Sunday school lesson. So, which is, I think is another reason why Jacob is this week. So, one of the things that the Antichrist will do is when he comes to power, he will sign a peace treaty with Israel, make it look like he's friendly to Israel, when in fact but he's not. Okay, so there are things going on earth during these 7 years during the tribulation, and there are things going on in heaven. On earth, God will judge sin and sinners through the seal and judgment and bowl judgments, which you can read about. Anybody know where? In Revelation. Okay, there are 21 individual judgments where over half of the earth's population will die. And while half the earth's population will die and everything will be very bad, there will still be a lot of people who come to know Christ, who come to follow Him. And 144,000 Jews will be sealed and protected so that they might spread the gospel to the world at the time. Yes, sir?
I have a question.
What?
In the new world, it's going to happen. Will this world be destroyed? Will you have the new earth now?
Yes.
Will the old earth be destroyed?
It's going to be
Kind of like recycling. Take the old world and recycle it into a new world. Is that an equitable
no.
analogy, you think?
I like
Renovated? No. Jesus is going to come in with a big broom. He's going to move everything.
It's not going to be different worlds.
Yeah, well, it says from the
The Bible says.
So it's going to be different. John says he sees it coming
Fervent
out.
heat is going to melt everything down.
Okay, in heaven, so those things that are happening on earth.
We're playing this conversation.
Have it afterwards.
No,
Okay,
it's about.
so afterwards. In heaven, so those are things that are going on earth. In heaven, the seat of Christ, which is a judgment for whom?
The non-believers. Right? Because we don't believe we got that judgment for
We will be judged on things that we have done and the way we have followed Christ on earth, and we will be given rewards for that. Amen.
Is it like in the Bible mentioned whether or not the Christians are going to be raptured out before the second tribulation, or what kind of scholarship?
There's both. I'm a pre-tribulation kind of guy myself, and that's what our curriculum is. I think our church is pre-trib.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the help, guys, back there. I'll be able to just stare.
You're the teacher.
Oh, Jeff, thank you. I asked where our churches stand. Even the guy in church.
Our church is going to go before.
So, there are, to answer your questions, there are views on both. There are people that believe both. I'm the one, our church, and what I personally believe is that the full tribulation is rapture. Okay?
I'm going to wait and see.
Thanks. No, it's dependent on you guys. So, the tribulation, or this 7 period, this first 7-year time period in the history of our planet will come to end with the second coming of Christ, where he will come down to end the tribulation. He'll gather up his armies to face the Antichrist and his armies, those people who have come to follow him at the Battle of Armageddon, which will be pretty crazy. You can read about that in Revelation 19. And after the Antichrist is defeated, he and his armies will be thrown into a lake of fire, or the lake of fire.
Not very fun.
Right? Okay. So we've gone through. You can see the second coming right there, where he comes down. That's when Armageddon happens, and all the fighting, and all the death and bloodshed. That wouldn't trivialize it at all. So after Armageddon, we can read in Revelation 20, where it says Satan will be bound by a huge chain and thrown into a bottomless pit. It says abyss in my Bible. Into a bottomless pit, and there, while he's there, he will be sealed up and not allowed to deceive and provoke and torment the world anymore for 1,000 years. At this time, also believers who died during the Old Testament and during the tribulation. So all people who were in the church age, which is after Christ's ascension, as in right now, we're all gone because of the what? The rapture. Very good. Glad you all pay attention. And then those people in the Old Testament and the people who died after the rapture will be resurrected at this time. Does that make sense? Okay.
So they're gonna,
That's okay. It's very confusing. It's very confusing stuff, and we don't have time to go as deeply as we should. Ma'am.
yeah, it's like a few ways. I heard that there's like you're not.
They're just chilling in there with the seats and the music and the highlights.
Yeah, wait.
Somebody already found that. Hold on.
Wait until after, whenever you know, oh, isn't that, no? Oh, okay.
Back when I'm back in grade 17.
Where are they? What? What?
That's what I put it.
I hope 17 is not all they have in there.
And then
We're not talking about coffee orders.
Yeah. Anybody more learned than I would like to answer that question? Are all the Old Testament heroes of faith already in heaven? And what does it mean by resurrected at the time? Don't say that because
What happens at the point of death? What happens at the point of death?
Right.
Does your soul stay in your body, or does your soul go to be with the Lord? Okay. That's your answer right there, I believe. I believe that Old Testament believers are in heaven with God right now. We're talking about a bodily resurrection.
Right.
A supernatural occurrence where your physical bodies will be resurrected. Just like Christ's body was resurrected from the tomb, so too will the Old Testament believers and all believers. Their bodies will be resurrected.
Thank you. He said what I had.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, like 7 heads, won't we?
I'm not sure.
Something like that.
I'll do some research on that one. About having stuff.
No, it's like a lion
Okay, so after the battle of Armageddon, after Satan is thrown, chained up, thrown in the abyss, will come the millennial reign of Christ. It'll be universal peace on earth as we live under the what?
So we're all gonna live on earth?
I'm pretty sure Jesus can do it. Okay, and if you want to read more about the millennium, which
Only for enough.
If Jesus can't do it,
we're getting there. Isaiah is the place to look for the millennium reign. Yes. No, it'll be wherever Jesus is. That's a good way to look at it. After so we'll have 1,000 years of peace on earth, goodwill toward men. And after those 1,000 years, Satan will be released from the abyss, from his chains. He will be allowed to deceive the world again, to attack and torment and bother. Again, he will build an army to attack Jerusalem because, he's like my grandma used to say, he's a glutton for punishment. And then when he gathers his army and attacks Jerusalem, he will see his entire army wiped out by fire from heaven. And then he will be thrown in the lake of fire where the Antichrist and all of his followers are, so that he might be tormented forever, and that's where he will stay forever. Yes, ma'am?
Okay, so you said that those people, you said that all Christians are going to believe at the
Mm-hmm.
And then you said that they're going to raise everybody who died after the rapture. Wouldn't those be non-believers?
No, it's people who are believers that become believers during the tribulation.
I think Jacob did.
That died in the tribulation.
Yeah, everybody's going to become a church Christian, but they're like, oh God, no.
There'll be a lot of people.
Earth's gone.
Few people Okay, after Satan is thrown into the lake of fire, then that's when we have the great white throne judgment, which is what y'all thought it was earlier. That's when everybody's judged, and the people, unbelievers are tossed into Jesus. I'm sorry, tossed into Satan. My bad. What's that the other kid?
It's scolding.
Okay, guys. Life is still going on this whole time, and that's what you have to keep in mind, that people aren't going to stop they're not going to stop having children and living their lives while all this stuff is going on. It's not going to stop. So if you think about it, during the 1,000 years of peace on earth, after about 700-800 years, there's going to be generation after generation after generation of people who weren't, well, it's like it is now. There are people who are disbelievers or unbelievers because they think they would have had to have been here when Christ was alive to really believe that he was alive. Does that make sense? There are people who are unbelievers who don't believe because they're so far removed from Jesus Christ that they don't choose to put their faith in Jesus Christ. And the same thing will happen again, and that's why when Satan is released after 1,000 years, he'll be able to deceive people again. Does that make sense? That doesn't make sense? What?
For like the 1,000 years when Jesus reigns on earth, it's going to be peaceful, right? And it's just going to be like normal life. People are born and people die, and Jesus is just there.
I don't know.
There's going to be death.
That's the one I don't know. I haven't been able to figure that part out yet.
I kind of want to let me see that, but I kind of don't want to let me see that.
Okay, so after that, what happens after that? That's when you hear the new heaven, the new earth stuff, when John says, I saw a new heaven, new earth come out of heaven, New Jerusalem, and blah, 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 and all that. That's when all of this happens. After Satan is defeated forever, that's when the new heaven, new earth stuff happens. Okay? When all crying and all death and all pain and all unhappiness is banished forever. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, it says like there's no crying or nothing, stuff like that. So like, what would not even be like the sixth day when
Well, that's not pain.
So like,
That's not crying because of pain.
so like, people will
Not cry.
cry.
For joy. That's different.
That's so fun.
Really? You like being in pain?
Well, I mean, it's better than being happy all the time, you know, like, oh, yay, I'm happy every day.
So, hey, Maggie, Maggie.
Okay, I have a point, listen. Okay, you know how people, like, if they, like, know something, like, all the time, okay, say, like, take this example. You go on vacation. You want to go on vacation for a long time. You're gonna get sick of that vacation. It's not gonna be vacation anymore. You're gonna want to be somewhere else. So if you're happy forever, you're gonna get bored. Everybody's happy.
Hey, Maggie, I know what y'all need to talk about tonight, Smaller.
On the note, the like vacation and God.
Well, you don't be tired of God. Right? You can't be happy.
That is
You're not gonna tired of God. Like, oh, I'm sick of you, God. It's like,
I think you're looking at it wrong because
but do you want to look up?
you're looking at it. Hold on.
Yes.
The way you look at things now is flawed
Very.
because of who we are.
What are you, like 5?
Hey, y'all stop. The way we look at things now, I said you, but I meant us when I said you. The way that we look at things now is very flawed because we're flawed. And it's, I don't think we will ever really know what actual God intended happiness is until then, and I don't think it's something we would ever get tired of. Okay, so that's
Be happy with it.
our timeline. Go. That's our timeline. I know it's confusing stuff, guys, and honestly, that this should have been like 5 different lessons, but it's all crammed into one. And so we can't get into the really, really deep stuff yet. Yeah, I'm cool blaming it on y'all. What?
The new earth to be after it is completely destroyed, or the top will be destroyed?
After both.
After.
Because if you look, the millennial ends, see where the millennial ends and the arrow split?
Uh-huh.
Between that, there's, I guess you can say the little dotted line right there.
Yeah.
That's where Satan is thrown into the lake of fire first.
Okay.
Okay. Second coming, after Jesus rose, the Antichrist into the fire, and then there's millennium, and then he comes back out.
Okay, so, where the arrow comes down, the second coming, that's when the Antichrist is defeated, and he and his armies are thrown in the lake of fire, and Satan is chained up and put in a bottomless hole, just to be let out again 1,000 years later. You're asking me to tell you why? So that God's glory and magnificence can be shown to a new generation of people. Other than that, I have no idea. Except probably more than 2 people.
No sin, but then all of a sudden sin in there.
God loves those people that He's going to give them the same choice.
I hope I live here that 1,000 years just so I can see it.
Okay, before we split up, I want to mention something. Y'all turn back to Daniel real quick. Daniel chapter 9.
But Joe, we can't do that. We sin every day.
Holy.
It'd be hard to be tempted by one thing.
Daniel chapter 9. I want to point, before we move on and get to our pods, which we'll do really quick here, I want to point something out that I was noticing this week, and when I was trying to get all this put into one neat and very helpful, succinct PowerPoint. Like that's usually possible.
And you didn't bring that one?
I want y'all to listen to this. Listen to verse 20. Now while I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God on behalf of the holy mountain of my God. While I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord God. And then verse 23, Gabriel says that God wanted him to tell Daniel all these things because he's highly esteemed. Well, if you look at verse 20, you know why Daniel's highly esteemed. And I'm not going to say that the angel Gabriel is going to come to you, and when you're in some type of a dream or standing on the street corner, if you are constantly praying and talking to God and confessing your sins and the sins of those around you to God. But it's a whole lot easier to hear from him and understand the direction for your life, just as he was giving Daniel the direction for the world. Because Daniel was highly esteemed, it's a lot easier to hear and to understand the direction you should follow for your life if you're doing these things that Daniel was doing. If you're praying, constantly speaking to God, confessing your sins in His Word, then a lot of the stuff that's going to come up in your life very soon, the choices you have to make, if you are genuinely doing those things, then that's when the Lord says, I'll make your path straight, so that you can understand where to go. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for this time, for this message. I pray that we can understand it a little bit more each time we look at it, Lord, so that we can be prepared for your coming, and that we can help do our small part to prepare the world for your coming. But I pray that you give us a better understanding as we go throughout this day about all of this stuff, Lord, and just bless each person in this room, and give us opportunities all the time to share that gospel with those around us, or that gospel that your Son, Jesus Christ, died on the cross for us, Lord, and paid that penalty for sin, paid our debt, so that we can be in eternity with you, Lord. And I pray these things in His name. Amen. Y'all get with your pods. I don't know. How many pods do we have?
I've got Rachel's group.
She's got Rachel.
And mine.
Each of the right. Yeah.
Be careful of the drink.
Problems with that there, Bill?
Cheers, so no way.
It is loud. Papa squat. Papa squat.
It was a good one day.